So now that I finished Deadly Premonition, and I looked up a little bit of the lore bits online through the internet, I didn't actually play through it. I can safely say that, yeah, I am a fan of the game. I was kind of mixed on it as I was playing it, but it is definitely one of those that once you know everything, once you understand it, it really does start to click, and you really do start to enjoy it for what it is. Unironically, I think the game is legitimately good in spite of all of its flaws, and I'm super, super hyped for Deadly Premonition 2's release this Friday, which I do expect. Honestly, all they have to do to make the game better is just improve the, maybe even the art style, which I see they have done. We'll have to see just what they did and whether they... and how it functions. I actually don't know anything about Deadly Premonition 2, so we'll have to see if it's if it actually manages to outdo the original. I think it's very possible, but we'll have to see. So yeah, I like Deadly Premonition a lot, but one of the things that really stick out to me, like now that I understand a little bit more about the game, how you go through it, its content and things like that, it really struck me how deep and complex this game is, like, narratively, in spite of, like, the weird animations and pacing and story elements. Like, when you can get past that, when you start to understand the game's warped logic and its sort of appeal, what it's trying to do, you really do start to peel back the layers and really appreciate what it does. This is a game with true narrative substance. There are things that aren't spelled out for you, the player, in the narrative, and it takes a considerable amount of work on behalf of the player to understand the town, its history, the characters, and what happened in the plot. Like, it's really interesting how there can be a podcast that doesn't have a ton of views, but how there could be a Deadly Premonition podcast that goes on for hours going over, like, neat story details, like the actual sequence of events that aren't spelled out in the actual storyline. You figure out who did it and a general idea as to why, but, like, a lot of the finer details, right? Like, there are plenty of minor characters that you don't actually encounter in the main quest line that actually are very, very relevant to the plot. It's fascinating how they executed this, how well it's fleshed out, and it stands in stark contrast to something like Uncharted, which does what it's supposed to do on the surface, but once you start to, like, really analyze it, you start to realize that it's completely retarded and makes no sense. For example, this is probably one of the things I go to. Uncharted 3, right? Drake is not at all descended from Sir Francis Drake. Like, he is just making. Well, I love how both these characters are named Francis. Anyway, so Drake is not actually descended from legendary explorer Francis Drake. He is making it up for seemingly to cope with the fact that he is a street orphan. Well, for one thing, why, if it wasn't true, it doesn't make any sense, like, at all. Like, that's the one thing we've been told about him from the beginning, right? And instead of, like, being a compelling plot twist, it's basically an early version of what happened with Joel in The Last of Us Part 2, right? It came out of nowhere with no context, and once it's over, it's never really brought up again, and it doesn't really matter at all. Like, in spite of what some people might tell you, it has no long-term consequences for the characters. Like, it doesn't really shatter Drake's sense of identity at all. Like, he's still Nathan Drake. He can still do all the things he's been doing. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, greatness from small beginnings. Like, it doesn't really benefit the narrative at all. Like, it's just there to be a weird plot twist regarding Drake's background, and other than that, like, you just immediately afterward, you just go back to generic Uncharted action. You know what I mean? Whereas in like in this one, right, you're uncovering like all sorts of crazy shit about the world and history. Like, it's insane. It's insane how different the difference in quality between like this small, low budget production versus this major AAA Naughty Dog release. Like, Deadly Premonition is legit better. Like, there's no debating this. Like, the only reason you would say otherwise is if you didn't actually play Deadly Premonition, which I can't really stress this enough. The people who hate Nintendo, the people who hate the Marios, the Zeldas, the Metroids, the Pikmins, the Animal Crossings, the ARMS, the Splatoon 2s, these people, the only people who hate these games, who prefer the PlayStation ones, they don't play Nintendo. Like, they never have, they never will, they don't know what they're missing out on. They have no qualifications. They have no credibility. They have no credentials. They are essentially only interested in PlayStation because it's cool, popular, and trendy, or at least it's supposed to be. It really isn't. It's basically being promoted by these multi-billion-dollar corporations. It's being propped up by this multi-billion-dollar corporation. Nobody actually cares about PlayStation the way people care about Nintendo. You know what I mean? It's I am just Deadly Premonition. I wonder if someone at Nintendo was a fan, and this is why the Nintendo Switch version happened. So Nintendo itself seems to agree with me in this regard, and I do think it's only a matter of time, right? Until more games like this start gaining steam on Nintendo's hardware. You know what I mean? Like, we already had the Devil's Third, which was better than Call of Duty. You know, we have the Splatoons, which are better than Overwatch. You know, you have the ARMS, which are better than competitive fighting games in the FGC. Like, you have all this stuff, right, that people are writing off for petty, stupid reasons. I can already tell you, Deadly Premonition 2 is probably going to be one of those games, right, one of the Star Fox Zero, Color Splashes, Devil's Third, that the media is going to try and just shit all over. Well, we'll have to see how that turns out. It's impossible to know at this point. I think most people are just going to memory hole it, the way they memory hold the Wonderful 101. I don't expect... Well, Deadly Premonition 2, I think, is going to stand heads and shoulders above The Last of Us Part 2, noticeably so. And I will be at the forefront of YouTubers talking about it when it launches later this week.